Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to hear that Cathy is distressed by what I would say is scaremongering around what the Labour Party is doing. The budget delivered £5 billion for farming over the next 2 years, a record amount. The last government failed to spend £300 million on farmers, and our plan is sensible, fair and proportionate and protects the smaller estates while fixing public services that they rely on.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are only 7 places in England, according to the House Library, where school funding per pupil is lower than my constituency of Aldershot and Farnborough. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that something has gone badly wrong when teachers are being forced to pay out of their own pocket for basic school supplies, and so many others have left the profession in droves over the past 14 years?
14 years.
Will ministers work with me to tackle the root of this problem so that we can give every young person in my constituency and beyond the very best start in life?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And every child deserves the opportunity to succeed in school and beyond. And I'm sorry to hear of the experience in her constituency. Last week I visited Raisingfield Primary School in my constituency, whose school council had a lot to say about the resources to our schools, and we have increased the core schools budget by £2.3 billion next year, increasing per pupil funding in real terms. And as her constituency, home of the British Army, I know she will also welcome the expansion of childcare support to service families deployed overseas, saving families around £3,400 a year, and I'm happy to ensure she gets a meeting with the relevant minister.
Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few weeks ago from that dispatch box, the Minister for Rural Affairs said that he'd been congratulated by a farmer over the introduction of the inheritance tax. Now, I think this farmer must have been a cannabis farmer, because just yesterday we had 10,000 farmers on Whitehall protesting against this madcap decision. So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that this decision should be thrown in the trash can along with Rachel from Accounts' CV?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he talks about CVs. It's good to see the honourable member doing well on his bench, once a Labour councillor, then a Tory MP, and now a Reform Chief Whip. Every time he switches party, he gets a promotion. Mr. Speaker, I've already outlined what we've done to support our farmers, and we'll continue to support the farmers, and we'll continue to invest in our public services to get Britain back on track.
Graham Stringer.
My right honourable friend has come under intense scrutiny from the press at different times. She must have found it very difficult. A press free to scrutinise politicians is absolutely vital in a free society and a democracy. Is she as concerned as I am about the Stasi-like interview that was given to Alison Pearson, the Daily Telegraph journalist, a week last Sunday? And does she agree with me that the Essex Police Force and other police forces would be better trying to deal with shoplifting, burglaries and other crimes rather than intimidating journalists?
Friend for that question, and also it is incredibly important around free speech and our press. It's part of our democracy, but it's also in direct response to his question. Of course, police are independent and it's a live investigation, and therefore it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on that. But I do believe that we should have a free press. It's part of our democracy, and we should have free speech, but with that comes responsibility of those that do it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday I met with 3 constituents in Parliament, Duncan Hawley, his wife Nicola and his 10-year-old daughter Hattie. Duncan is a sheep farmer and he stewarded his family farm for most of his life. He's outraged and hurt and worried about the government's deeply damaging family farm tax. And he's deeply worried about food security, food inflation and whether we'll even be able to pass that farm on to future generations. So my question to the Deputy Prime Minister is very simple. Why has this Labour government declared war on British farmers?
Well, Well, I say to the honourable member and to Duncan and Nicola that this government hasn't declared war on farmers. The vast majority of farms will not pay any inheritance tax, and we have protected them. We have been as generous as we can, and the farmers rely on our public services like everybody else. We inherited a £22 billion black hole from the Conservatives, who spent reserves 3 times over. We are investing in our schools, our hospitals, our public services and housing. And if the honourable gentleman wants to suggest what he would do differently, if he doesn't agree with that, like the Leader of the Opposition, then he should say so.
Not time over.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous government failed countless women through chronic underfunding of maternity services. At Stroud Maternity Hospital, postnatal beds have remained closed for over 2 years. Local midwife-led units like Stroud deliver fantastic quality of care for women whilst having really low intervention rates during birth. Can the Deputy Prime Minister outline what steps this government will take to improve maternity services?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question. I'm sorry to hear about the situation in Stroud, and I thank him for raising this important issue for women in his constituency. The Darcy report clearly set out that under the previous government, the NHS was broken, with patients waiting too long for care. We're committed to ensuring that all women and babies receive safe, compassionate and personalised care through pregnancy, birth and, critically, following those months ahead. We will ensure maternity services deliver the best outcomes for patients as we invest to build an NHS fit for the future.
Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Lefarydd. Now, I know how much professional care work means to the Deputy Prime Minister. Carried care homes in Porthmadog tell me they won't be able to absorb the additional exorbitant costs imposed by her government's budget. They tell me they believe this poses a threat worse than COVID to their business. Wow. Will she personally intervene, therefore, so that her government at least makes care providers exempt from the rise in employers' national insurance contributions?
Here.
Well, she's absolutely right to say that I absolutely value the work of care providers and carers across the whole of the UK, and that's why we've put additional funding in through the budget as well. And we've also been making sure that care providers and those that work in the charities, including hospices, amongst the tax regime provides the most generous amongst in the world, Mr. Speaker. This includes tax release for charities and their donors worth over £6 billion for the tax year of April 2024. We put record funding into our NHS. We've increased funding into adult social care and children's social care, and we'll continue to support our public services that were left on the knees by the last government.
Fred Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago today, the Chancellor announced a historic £22.6 billion investment into the NHS because it is our duty to rescue this country's health service after 14 years, sadly, of mismanagement, underinvestment and, unfortunately, also misleading announcements from the party opposite. In Plymouth, Derriford Hospital, where I represent, serves not just my constituency, but 19 constituencies across the South West. It is the only major trauma centre for adults in the South West. However, we have really suffered from those decisions from the Conservatives. Can the Deputy Prime Minister outline how that historic investment is going to make its way to Plymouth?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for being such a champion for Plymouth, and as he knows, we're providing £25 billion extra over the next 2 years from the Department for Health and Social Care, including the largest capital budget in real terms since 2010, and we'll make sure that every corner of the UK can see the generosity and how that will improve services for them, and I'll make sure he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss in detail how Plymouth will be able to capitalise off that.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. The town of Cheshunt in my constituency of Broxbourne has no banks or building societies. We've been told we're not eligible for a banking hub. We've been told we're not eligible for a banking hub. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that every town that wants a banking hub should be eligible for one so that my residents can have access to their hard-earned cash?
Well, Mr Speaker. We've committed to 350 banking hubs through this Parliament, and I'm sure the Minister will be happy to meet with him on that point. But I'm also hopeful that he also will be thankful of the Levelling Up Fund Round 2 money that we secured, with £14.3 million going to Waltham Cross Resistance Project, regenerating the town centre for his constituents.
Jonathan Hinder.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I know better than most that under the last Tory government, neighbourhood policing was stripped away, leaving the police invisible in towns like those I represent in Pendle and Clitheroe. As a former police inspector, I'm delighted that the new Labour government has committed to rebuild neighbourhood policing. Can the Deputy Prime Minister assure my constituents that Labour's neighbourhood policing guarantee will soon ensure that every town has a dedicated neighbourhood team?
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank him for his expertise in this area and for the work that he did previous to coming to this place. Tory austerity has decimated neighbourhood policing, and we'll put thousands more neighbourhood police and PCSOs back on our streets to ensure every community has a named local officer, and we'll tackle illegal drugs, half-night crime, crack down on antisocial behaviour and go after the gangs who lure young people into violence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Scottish and Welsh governments have banned the construction of new waste incinerators because of health and pollution concerns. The last government paused them and committed to banning them. Why then is this government busy approving them?
Well, Mr Speaker, planning, as the honourable gentleman knows, we always follow the strict rules in regard to that, making sure that safety and other factors are always taken into consideration, and will continue to do so.
Yuan Yang.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thousands of families in my constituency of Earley and Woodley have moved into new build developments in Shinfield, in Loddon Park and beyond, but many have found their dreams of home ownership punctured by unfair and opaque property management charges. Can the Deputy Prime Minister reassure my constituents by setting out how the leasehold reform bill will address these concerns, and would she like to meet with me and affected constituents?
Well, I welcome my honourable friend to her place. Unjustified increases in service charges are completely unacceptable, Mr Speaker. The Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act will provide homeowners with greater rights, powers and protections over their homes, and that includes greater transparency over service charges. For too long, leaseholders have been ripped off. It's this government that will sort it out.
Man of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Today is Red Wednesday, in which we remember all those persecuted for their belief worldwide. A recent report by Aid to the Church in Need shows that in the countries surveyed, persecution of minorities has increased by 60%. In the light of this, will the government commit to reappointing the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion and Belief, a post that has remained vacant since July, and do that as soon as possible, hopefully by Christmas, so that we in the United Kingdom can play our part in defending religious and belief minorities worldwide?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. We are committed to champion human rights, including the right to freedom of religion or belief. I join the right honourable member in marking Red Wednesday, an important moment to show support for all those persecuted around the world for their religion or belief. And today we will light up the FCDO buildings in the UK in red in support of that, Mr Speaker. Envoy roles are under consideration, will be decided upon in due course.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Harshita Brella was killed and found in the boot of her car as it was taken from her home in Corby on the 14th of November. This tragic murder left the community shocked and scared and is being investigated by the police. Harshita was protected by a domestic violence order that lasted 28 days. It was not renewed. Would the Deputy Prime Minister agree that all must be done to reassure the community and to bring the perpetrator to justice? And would she further agree that in some circumstances, domestic abuse orders should last longer than 28 days when the victims are most vulnerable?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this case, Mr Speaker. Hajita's family, my thoughts are with her family in this horrifying set of circumstances where Hajita should have been protected and felt protected. This government is committed to halving violence against women and girls, Mr Speaker, and we continue to do our work, hopefully across this House, to make sure that we can end circumstances where Hajita faced and we can stop this kind of barbaric action.
Lincoln Chat.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Spelthorne Litter Pickers are an outstanding organisation of 1,000 volunteers who do great work up and down my constituency, come rain or shine. And last week they were awarded the King's Award for Voluntary Service. Would the Deputy Prime Minister, the Government, indeed the whole House, like to join me in congratulating the Spelthorne Litter Pickers and to thank them for all that they do?
I absolutely agree with the honourable chap, may I say my honourable friend, in terms of the Spelthorne Litter Pickers, and say what an important role across all of our constituencies where local communities come together and volunteers help, in particular young people as well do a lot of this in our constituencies, Mr Speaker. So I think across the whole House we congratulate them on their award and those that do the voluntary work and support our community.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I draw the House's attention to my register of interest as a very proud trade union member. In 2019, the party opposite promised to deliver an employment bill that would protect and enhance workers' rights in the UK, and like so many of their promises, they never delivered. But my right honourable friend has done it, cleaning up the mess that the party opposite left behind. So would the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that her employment rights bill is the biggest upgrade to workers in a generation?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And declaring an interest, me and my right honourable friend used to be conveners for Unison North West as well, and I champion the work that she's done on behalf of her constituents and for working people of this country. The government is delivering on its plan to make work pay and to ensure that employment rights are fit for a modern economy. And the Employment Rights Bill will benefit people in some of the most deprived areas of the country and will save them up to £600 per year in lost income from hidden costs of insecure work. So I commend the work that many honourable members, some across the House and in particular on our benches, that have brought this bill to fruition.
Reb Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The whole House recognises the authenticity of the Right Honourable Lady's backstory, her pride in being a carer, and indeed in her recent elevation. By contrast, in June, the Chief Constable of Northamptonshire was sacked for misrepresenting his CV. And just last month, Tanya Nasri, the nurse, was imprisoned for 5 years for doing the same. Does the Right Honourable Lady agree with me that such serious consequences are right and just in such cases?
Well, Mr Speaker, what I would say to the honourable gentleman, I know where he's trying to go with this. What I would say to the honourable gentleman is, sorry, the right honourable gentleman, I do apologise. What I would say to the right honourable gentleman is our Chancellor in the last 4 months has shown more competence than the last 4 Chancellors that he had.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My home city of Edinburgh, despite being Scotland's capital, is the lowest funded per head local authority in Scotland due to austerity inflicted on us by the SNP in Holyrood. That means great projects like the Ripple face closure. Now that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Scotland, has secured the biggest block grant to Scotland in the history of the Scottish Parliament, will the Deputy Prime Minister work with me to ensure the Scottish Government uses that to end austerity for my constituents?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. He's entirely right to raise the impact of SNP's irresponsible management of Scotland's finances and the austerity that they're inflicting on his constituents. Our budget rejected a return to austerity, and we delivered the largest funding settlement for Scotland in real terms since devolution. The result of the budget is clear, Mr Speaker. The SNP have the powers, they have the money, they have no more excuses.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I was contacted last week by a constituent whose husband has stage 4 bowel cancer. He had a routine scan in June but didn't receive the results until early November, and unfortunately within that period he received unsuitable chemotherapy and his cancer has progressed. Given that Shropshire has the worst record in the country for CT and MRI scan results, can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister the same question that my constituent has asked me? When is the government going to address this problem?
Well, I'm sincerely sorry to hear about your constituent's husband and the terrible diagnosis at stage 4 and the delays in that. We've set out before how difficult the inheritance was in terms of the cancer diagnosis waiting list. People are waiting far too long for treatment. It's why the Chancellor put record money and funding into our NHS so that we can catch cancer on time. And I know that the Health Secretary is determined to do this, and it's a personal endeavour to him to make sure that people are not having to wait and don't end up in the circumstances that are so tragic for your constituent.
Just for the record, I'd like to apologise to Mr Kruger. I got the wrong person. Mr Wilder's now owned up to it. What I would say is don't... What I would say to the honourable member is, don't sit next to him again. Right, that completes Prime Minister's question.
Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker in his element there. That was Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner taking questions from MPs in the House of Commons. We're still joined by our fantastic guests, Labour MP for Bassett Law, Joe White, and the Shadow Culture Secretary, Stuart Andrew.
You've been sending your questions to gbnews.com/yoursay for our panel because, of course, this programme is different. It's all about you. So let's start with pensioners. Goodness, Joe. Gillian asks, the triple lock for pensioners already existed, so Labour have done nothing other than agree to maintain it. How is it possible for pensioners to be better off under Labour? A cynic would say, of course, that pensioners often don't vote Labour, and maybe that's partly why you're not prioritising them.
I disagree completely. My focus has been on my pensioners. I've been out trying to find those pensioners who will be impacted by the loss of the winter fuel payment. This government, in the recent budget, we increased the hardship fund to £1 billion. That means that those people just on the threshold can actually apply for additional support. The triple lock means that pensions will increase by £475 next year. That triple lock will continue throughout this government. We are not increasing taxes on working people, and our budget is focused on rebuilding our economy. By rebuilding our economy, we actually rebuild wealth, we keep prices low, and we want to ensure that our pensioners can participate equally in the economy.
But there's still lots of people entitled to pension credit, aren't there? Yes. And it's an incredibly complicated form, 230-odd questions. Are you actively trying to target those people and get them signed up?
Yes, there's been a huge uptake since August of the number of people applying for pension credit. I've worked with my CAB. I've asked my CAB to go out into the community to provide that support, and they've been running workshops and events in my constituency so that people can get that support. And it's essential that they can access those services very, very quickly.
Stuart Andrew, Shadow Culture Secretary, the government say they're protecting the poorest pensioners and doing all that they can to ensure that take-up is up. Fair enough?
No, it's not, frankly, because, you know, that triple lock was there anyway.
That's what Gillian said.
It is insulting to these pensioners to say that that's somehow going to help them. The reality is this has happened really quickly, and a lot of pensioners, particularly the poorest, will have already factored in that £300 or that payment was going to come, and now they've got to find that money from elsewhere. And that's a real challenge, I think, for so many of those for those pensioners. But also because, you know, the national insurance contribution, employee national insurance contributions are going up, that means business is going to have to find that money from somewhere, and their costs are going up, so they'll pass that on to the consumers. So the costs to the pensioners is going to go up buying food and, you know, things that they need. And that really worries me.
Is there a danger for the Tories in opposing everything that it will enable Labour to accuse you as sort of not serious, financially irresponsible? You know, you have to prioritise too, right? But at the moment you're saying no, and Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, made that point. If they suggest money which has to be saved in order to balance the books, you always oppose it. Is there a danger that you look financially irresponsible?
So actually we're not doing that, and I think Kemi made that very clearly last week, that actually we will oppose where we think they're wrong, but we'll also be constructive in our approach to opposition. We actually already had a plan which was looking at welfare reform, looking at productivity improvement within the National Health Service, which had already been put in place to save billions of pounds. So it's not like we're saying we're just opposing that. We just think that this is the wrong choice and it's hitting the hardest pensioners the most. And we'll see, as I said earlier at the beginning of the programme, 50,000 more pensioners going into poverty, rising to 100,000 next year. That's not wrong, in my view.
OK, got a question for you from Alison from West Yorkshire. She says, I'm sick of hearing about the farmers. I'm a small business run from my home and garden. I've worked really hard to establish it, serving the public. I will be subject to inheritance tax, so why not them? Your representative, Alex Burkhart, who one of our viewers said was fantastic today, by the way, but he went on farmers, big issue in the news, big demonstration. Alison from West Yorkshire, we love West Yorkshire.
Absolutely.
She says, well, I've got to pay it. Why not them?
So, look, I mean, I'm absolutely on side with Alison because, you know, support for small businesses is really important. I've been really worried in the last couple of weekends when I've been in my constituency speaking to small businesses who are now saying that they're not going to expand and employ more people because the national insurance contributions increase is hampering that. That really worries me. So absolutely get where Alison's coming from. But the farming issue is really, really important because they may be asset rich, but they're actually cash poor. And so suddenly, you need, an average farm needs to be hundreds of acres to make a profit. And suddenly they'll have to be saddled with bills of up to, say, £500,000. They don't have that in the bank account. And what will happen? They'll have to sell off land and we'll start to see a complete change in our rural landscape. Those long-standing family farms are in danger of disappearing. And then that has a real impact on food security in this country.
We will let our Labour representative come back on those points that you make. We're going to take a short break, but we've got loads more questions, your questions, to put to our panel, so don't go anywhere. The Labour MP for Bastlaw, Joe White, and the Shadow Culture Secretary, Stuart Andrew, will still be here to answer your questions. Short break now.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It certainly was a cold start this morning. We're expecting further cold weather on the way with wintry showers, though for many of us, we're actually going to see lots of fine weather, lots of sunshine, though it is going to be feeling cold. That's all thanks to this cold northerly flow that's currently stretching across the country, bringing in those wintry showers, particularly across parts of Scotland. Plenty of snow and sleet showers here, and just feeding into northern exposed coasts. Northern coast of East Anglia too could catch these, but generally any exposed coast could catch these wintry flurries. But inland, many of us are going to see plenty of sunny spells, though it is going to be feeling cold. Highs of only around 5 or 6 degrees in southern parts of the country. Now, we do have some snow and ice warnings issued for the Met Office for the overnight period. For parts of Scotland, for example, where we're still expecting those snow showers to feed into northern coast, feeding through into inland areas too. But even where we don't see the showers and we see clear spells, it is going to be turning cold with some frost and plenty of icy stretches. Still a few showers feeding around exposed coasts, but plenty of clear spells as we head into the overnight period. And that does mean it's going to be turning particularly cold as soon as the sun goes down, with frost and some ice patches in places, so do take care. A change on the way though across the southwest as we see outbreaks of rain move into parts of Devon and Cornwall. This could be heavy at times and once again could fall as sleet and snow, mainly above high ground. But a cold night on offer, and once again do take care as it could be frosty and icy to start the day on Thursday. So those showers continuing across parts of Scotland, still falling as sleet and snow, but we do have outbreaks of rain feeding in across the south, once again falling as sleet and snow mainly above high ground. But across the central slice of the UK, once again plenty of sunshine to go around, but it is going to be feeling cold with highs of around 5 Celsius. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
On the southbound side of the M1, 2 lanes are closed. There's queuing traffic after an accident from 35 Rotherham through to Meadow Hall at 34. Northbound on the M1, there's a partial block after junction 28 due to an accident. It's also slow on the opposite side as traffic looks over. Northbound on the M6, long delays now. There are 3 lanes closed. It's due to spillage of diesel and a pickup truck fire from Stafford North at 14 to Stoke-on-Trent at 15. Delays at before 13 for Stafford South. It is adding around 40 minutes to your morning journey. All clear though for the southbound side of the M5. An earlier issue on the exit slip road, a broken down vehicle saw a lane closure at Weston-super-Mare junction 21. That's just cleared, all lanes reopened and traffic on the move. So that's your very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Well, we're still joined in the studio by Labour MP for Bassett Law, Joe White, and Shadow Culture Secretary, Stuart Andrew. Joe, let's pick up on farming. Have the government misjudged this? You must have a lot of farmers in your constituency. I mean, some of them are very elderly. They're farming into their 80s. They perhaps don't have that option of passing things on 7 years before they die. Should the government, at the very least, take another look at that? We've already had 1 suicide over this.
Well, it's not since 1992 that farmers had to think about inheritance tax. I think it is a difficult decision that the government have made. You have to put it at the background of this is the £22 billion black hole that we've got to fill. But I've got farmers, definitely got farmers in my constituency. I've had 3 came to see me yesterday. I went out into the crowd so I could actually hear for myself what they had to say, and I saw how many people were coming into Parliament to speak to my colleagues. It was impressive. I've also met farmers in my constituency. So working with my farmers is very, very important to me. They're honest, they're hardworking, and they're finding this very, very difficult. So my commitment to them is that I'm going to be talking to government about the concerns that they raise with me. But my other commitment is that as soon as I joined Parliament, I joined up with the National Farmers Union course so that I can get to know my farmers better. I'm going to be visiting different farms across the country, learning about the issues that are facing them. But also, it's important that they should know that this government has committed £5 billion to farmers in this budget. We also want to promote using British food and farmers' food. So we're actually increasing the amount that goes into feeding the army, our hospitals, our schools, because we want to ensure that in the past it was 40%, 50% of the food that our army will eat will be grown on British farms. And that's so, so important. We've got to keep that trade going.
OK. We've got a few minutes left, so we're going to do a bit of quick fire. Stuart Andrew, Shadow Culture Secretary. Andy said, is Starmer back for Prime Minister's questions? You can see. Or is he still missing? Do you think the Prime Minister is spending a lot of time abroad? This is just part of the course, right? You've got international responsibilities. You're the Prime Minister. You have to represent Britain abroad. Or is he doing too much of it?
No, to be fair, look, it would be easy to have a cheap shot, but to be fair, as Prime Minister, he does need to engage internationally. Attending these summits is really important. I'd say actually now, given the sort of volatile situation we're seeing around the world, it is important that actually we work with partners all over the world. And so, you know, I still think he's got a massive agenda to fix here, and he needs to focus on that because there are real issues that he has caused. But in fairness, internationally, it is a time for us to work with leaders from other countries.
Fair enough.
OK, so Stuart agrees it's OK for the PM to be abroad. So Mike Slade from Leicestershire, thank you, Mike, for telling us where you're from, has sent a question. When will the Chancellor resign over the CV scandal? Of course, it appears that her job titles on LinkedIn have been altered. It's not going away, this. A few questions being raised about this now.
To be honest, I'd rather focus on the job that Rachel's doing right now, she came into Parliament, discovered the huge financial hole, 22 billion, 3 times overspent the reserve, a government that had no plans previously. She spent her time here putting it right. And this budget is the start. It's fixing the foundations. The next stage is how we rebuild the economy. And I trust Rachel will deliver that.
OK. Stuart Andrew, she worked at the Bank of England. That makes you an economist, no?
Well, I'm not so sure about that. But, you know, look, lots of questions are being asked. My colleague Graham Stewart asked a really important question about other people who have found themselves in a spot of bother, quite rightly, because their CVs hasn't been right. Let's just get the answers to it. Questions are being asked. We're sort of hitting radio silence. We need the answers to them so then we know what we're dealing with.
OK, we're going to have... This is a bit of a big question from Paul. Paul, by the way, all of your questions are brilliant, including Paul's, which we're going to come on to, but we really do like to know where you're from. So, you know, I'm being the speaker now. Just book your ideas up for next time and tell us. Paul just says this. Inheritance tax, it should be scrapped for everyone. Joe?
Well, we've got to fund our public services. You know, currently our public services are trash, completely in a mess. They're underfunded by the previous government. You actually voted for that trust budget that destroyed our economy. We've got to find the funds. We need to rebuild our health service. We've got to build our criminal justice service. We've got to rebuild our schools. And we need the funds to do that. And it's the rich that will pay more inheritance tax. And for me, that's entirely appropriate.
Stuart? It was floated before the election campaign at various points that the Conservatives were thinking about it. They raised the threshold to £1 million for a couple, didn't they? But it's incredibly unpopular. And there's plenty of people looking at the farmers and thinking, well, hang on, they've got a much better deal than we have.
Look, I mean, I think inheritance tax is something we will have to look at as a party in the future. It's too early for us at this moment to be thinking about what those policies will be. But look, first of all, I would say we put in record money into the National Health Service. We saw education standards rise in this country under us as a government, so I don't accept the premise that's been presented. But I do also understand why people are really fed up with things like inheritance tax, because they've worked all their lives for the assets that they now own. And so I do think these are questions that we as a party will have to look at and address in the future. But the immediate issue right now is the significant impact on our potential, on our countryside, our rural way of life, if we don't protect the farmers.
It's been great to have you both. You have been watching and listening to PMQs Live with Gloria DePera and Catherine Forster. It is now time for your weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It certainly was a cold start this morning. We're expecting further cold weather on the way with wintry showers, though for many of us we're actually going to see lots of fine weather, lots of sunshine, though it is going to be feeling cold. That's all thanks to this cold northerly flow that's currently stretching across the country, bringing in those wintry showers, particularly across parts of Scotland. Plenty of snow and sleet showers here, and just feeding into northern exposed coasts. Northern coast of East Anglia too could catch these, but generally any exposed coast could catch these wintry flurries. But inland, many of us are going to see plenty of sunny spells, though it is going to be feeling cold. Highs of only around 5 or 6 degrees in southern parts of the country. Now, we do have some snow and ice warnings issued for the Met Office for the overnight period. For parts of Scotland, for example, we're still expecting those snow showers to feed into northern coast, feeding through into inland areas too. But even where we don't see the showers and we see clear spells, it is going to be turning cold with some frost and plenty of icy stretches. Still a few showers feeding around exposed coasts, but plenty of clear spells as we head into the overnight period. And that does mean it's going to be turning particularly cold as soon as the sun goes down, with frost and some ice patches in places, so do take care. A change on the way though across the southwest.